Welcome, everybody. Kate, I'm going to invite you to, if you wouldn't mind helping with the waiting room as folks continue to come in.
Will do, will do.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to have you with us. I am Michelle Sullivan, and this is the second in a series of four on our Time to Thrive conversation series. This one will focus on engaging adolescents through the emerging research of David Yeager and other developmental colleagues that have informed his work. Folks like Carol Dweck, who has introduced the kind of idea of the growth mindset. Um, so I direct the Wyoming Enrichment Network. We're a statewide organization dedicated to bridging the gap between Wyoming's educational programs and the communities they uplift. And we do that by providing resources, support, and opportunities that inspire lifelong learning, growth, and connection. As Dr. Yeager writes, imagine a world in which older adults engage with young people in ways that reliably leave the next generation inspired, involved, and ready to contribute. And that's what we hope we're doing. As the tools of neuroscience have progressed, researchers are better able to look into the living brain across the lifetime and track the remarkable changes that are occurring there. Just as infants experience significant biological changes, research using multiple methods has revealed that adolescence is a period of dramatic reconstruction. In fact, adolescence is now considered to be a, a developmental sensitive period or a metaphorical window into the development in which there are opportunities for growth in a particular domain. Adolescents are particularly open to new ideas and experience. They are also they also have greater capacity to think conceptually and imagine the future. But as educators, youth professionals, parents, we are awash in a narrative that pathologizes this period of development. Part of what we at the Enrichment Network are trying to work toward is to reframe that narrative and to really see adolescence as a time in life and the individuals experience it not as a problem to be solved or a time to be endured, but rather a wonderful opportunity to be capitalized on in ways that will have long-term benefit for our young people and ultimately our communities. Just just as young people are going through this remarkable neural transformation, they enter educational settings that may be working against them. This is the paradox that Dr. Yeager invites us to think deeply about and consider how each of us as educators, mentors, or parents engage in a mentor mindset that simultaneously provides high support and high expectation in ways that young people are not asked to go it alone. I'm delighted to welcome Kelly Bryant, who serves as a 4-H educator at the University of Maryland Extension. She's been there since January 2024. She grew up within the 4-H community and has dedicated herself to its growth and success in the county and state of Maryland. As a former teacher and special education staff member, Kelly brings a wealth of knowledge, enthusiasm, and a genuine love for empowering young, diverse minds. And she'll be joined by Mitch Kraft. Mitch is an independent education consultant with over 24 years experience as a teacher, principal, district administrator, and trainer. Currently, Mitch designs custom professional development and coaching for leaders across numerous school districts. As an assistant superintendent and a principal, he's led wonderful learning teams across our educational system in Wyoming. I've asked each of them to share how the book 10 to 25 has impacted their approaches and how their concepts about development have really impacted their practice. After, we'll have an opportunity to share additional guests' comments and reactions. We'll hear from Nick Cooper, who's a principal at Sheridan District 2, Julie Greer from the Center for Vital Community, and Joanne Pruitt from the State Library. But right now, I'd like to invite Kelly Bryant to start us off. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you, everyone. If at any point I start going out a little bit, if you will just let me know in the chat. Sometimes, even though I work for the university system, sometimes our internet can be a little unstable, and especially because it's raining here on the East Coast. So, for whatever reason, the rain seems to mess with us. Um, so, a little bit about me, and I know that Michelle gave you a little bit of an overview. I'm also the mother of three teenagers. So, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and then I have two sons who are 16 and 18 years old. So, this book not only resonated professionally to me, but also personally within my own way of parenting and dealing with my teenagers at home. Um, the book, I hope everybody's read it, 10 to 25 by David Yeager, has been something that I've been part of a book study with the neural education group. If you've never heard of them, I can actually share their link in the chat. I shared it with Mitch a little bit earlier. They're a nonprofit organization, and it just gives educators, I just put it in the chat, it gives educators some more insight into the neurodiverse workings of the brain of kids and how it develops and how it changes, and how educators, whether they're formal or informal, can better work with youth and make sure that they're tapping every kid wherever they are, because every child is unique and different. And like we learned in this book, it's how do you make sure that you are touching every person and reaching out to them so that they feel supported, so that they feel like you are mentoring them, that whole mentor mindset versus what I'll call old school education, of where the teacher just instructs and not barks commands, but definitely gives commands. We're in a whole different mindset now, especially post COVID. Um, One thing that I liked about the book is, as a previous educator, um, I was happy to see that I had done some of this in my classroom with students. One thing I always would do was I would help the students help me create our classroom rules. I didn't feel like it was for me to be the dictator of a classroom. It was more, let's be a community. And how do we build the community in our classroom? So, one of the things we did is we talked about, okay, we're going to make 10 rules for our classroom, and what should they be? So, every class had a different set of rules based on what was important to that class individually. And that's how we really started off the year, so that they knew they were part of the process, that I wanted to hear them. I wanted to meet them where they were. Um, and as somebody who had worked in special education, it was very important for me to work with, especially the neurodiverse youth, who might have been on a 504 plan or had an IEP, an individualized educational plan, to ensure they were receiving their accommodations and modifications to perform at the same level as their peers. So it was an equity issue. Whenever you're working with neurodiverse youth or neurodiverse people in general, I think it's very important to look at this book and to consider what you can do to change some of the things, whether you're doing it in the work life or when it's working with youth. Um, I actually have an employee that works for me right now who's 24. So she falls within this 10 to 25 framework. And so I use a lot of these strategies even with people who work with me because it's so relevant. Um, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I have teenagers, so I'm a little bit older. So the way I do things and the way I see things is definitely different when you're looking at that 10 to 25-year-old range of age. So one thing that I've done to change how I present information to youth and how I work with them is I took the book, and with the book study that I was part of, we came up with some actionable mentor mindset practices that we could put in place based on what we had learned together. Because during every book study that we got together over Zoom, we would talk about, okay, we read these chapters. What did we already know? And then what was something that we knew, but we know we need to change? And how can we turn that into action? So the first one is leading with respect before expectations. You have to have that mutual respect. And that's usually hardest for us as adults to have that, to feel like we're being disrespected by youth. And you really have to be able to come out of what your comfort zone is and be willing to have that mutual respect. When I was teaching, my biggest thing was I was starting every day a new day. So if I had a problem with a student or a parent or an administrator, sorry, Mitch, I'm kind of like, you know what happens between administrators and staff. But if I was having that issue, you start every day new. You start it fresh. It's a clean slate and it's time to change things. And as long as you're able to walk into each day with that mindset, and it's not easy, you know, it is difficult, but I think it makes us less stressed and it sets youth up to really thrive for us. The second actionable practice we talked about was replacing commands with questions. We do this a lot in education, especially with youth who might be on the spectrum, who might have ASD, of being able to ask questions versus barking commands because they don't take well to that. So how can we do that? So instead of saying, stop messing around, maybe we say, so what's the goal here? And what's getting in the way of reaching that goal? And then you can work on a plan together. And sometimes it's the whole class or it's the whole group that you have to come at with a question versus a command of, hey, why can't we get going on this thing? What can we do differently? How can we change this? So asking questions helps them be part of the process versus us just barking commands. Number 3 was explain the why behind our expectations. So why do we want them to behave a certain way or do a certain thing? So especially with teens, they're going to be more motivated when they feel like there's a purpose and when they feel like it's not some arbitrary thing we're just throwing out to them. So just making sure we explain the why. So I just did this. I offered a class on, it's called, oh my goodness, Fun with Foods for some of the youth in our program. And they were 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. And they were having a hard time. It was a mess. Our kitchen had flour everywhere. We were creating pizza from scratch. And I was showing them the cost benefits, the health benefits, and the taste differences. And we had flour everywhere. And I said, okay, in order for us to do our next class, we have to clean up and get all the flour up and wash all of our dishes. So then we get to taste our food. So then we get to eat it. So making our kids see that there's a reason why we're asking them to do something. We're not just saying, hey, clean this up. And if you're a parent, I mean, this is what I do with my 14-year-old daughter can't stand unloading the dishwasher. And I've got news for her. I don't like that chore at all. So that's why I ask her to do it. But I always say to her, hey, what would you prefer? Do you want to unload the dishwasher or do you want to do the dirty dishes? And I ask her the question, and then I know usually she's going to pick the clean dishes. And I'm like, okay, so I will be the one to clean up the dirty dishes. Or if it's like the trash, hey, do you want to take out the bathroom trash or the kitchen trash? Both of them are gross, but at least you're giving your kids an option there and they get to pick. Number 4 is validate their feelings. Even if they can't change the situation that they're in. So validation, I love this. Validation doesn't mean agreement. Just because you're validating what they're saying doesn't mean you necessarily agree. My daughter was having a very bad day yesterday, and she was definitely lashing out. She hung up the phone on me at one point. I was like, okay, we're at that stage. This is fun. But I just said to her, I said, let me know when you want to talk. And I just left it at that. So last night she texted me and said, can you give me 20 minutes? And then I want to have a conversation. I said, sure. And it was the same sort of thing. I didn't agree with what she was saying because some of it was just out in left field and she's a 14-year-old girl and hormones are all over the place. But I told her that I heard her. So I hear what you're saying. And I know that that's difficult for you. How can I help? So I'm not agreeing with it, but I'm at least validating her feelings, that I understand that she's upset and I want to try to help her get to the next step. So even with students, if you validate their feelings, if They're struggling with a grade. I don't understand why I got this grade. And they don't think they deserve that grade. But if you can at least take the time to explain and say, I hear you. I understand that you're really upset about receiving a D on this paper, but let's go through it. Let me show you. And then even giving them an opportunity to redo the paper or redo the assignment for partial credit. That's what I used to always do as a teacher, because if they're willing to put in the time and the effort, it shows them you're willing to work with them. And it also shows the parents, whoa, she's really going above and beyond and making some real effort with my child. Number 5 was give strategic affirmation. So point out the effort they're making, the growth they're making, any improvements, because sometimes they're not going to reach that end goal. It's just not going to happen. But if you're giving them that affirmation on specifically what you're praising them for, so don't just say, hey, great job. That was fantastic. Well, what was fantastic? What was so great about what they did? If you can provide specifics, it seems to go a lot further for the 10 to 25-year-olds. Number 6, because I feel like I'm taking up a lot of time, sorry. Hold high expectations for our students, for our kids. Here in Maryland, I don't know how it is in Wyoming, but I feel one of the reasons I left teaching was because I feel like this is a horrible thing to say, but I'm gonna say it. I feel like we're dumbing down education here in Maryland, and we keep lowering the bar, where if we were to praise our students, if we were to say we have this expectation, they want to meet that. We're just not giving them the opportunity always to do that. So if you say, I'm holding you to a high standard because I know you can do it. I really know you can make the effort. I've seen you do it. They like it. They feel that affirmation. They feel like, oh, wow, this person really has trust in me, really has my back. I want to prove to them that I can do it. Number 7, make space for their voice so that they feel like they're being heard. Let them give input. Let them share their point of view. It will help to provide that buy-in and that responsibility if they feel like they've had an opportunity to share their feelings. And I never had an issue with my students sharing their voice. Like if they didn't like something, I was always open and welcoming to hear what they had to say. If they didn't feel like a due date was doable, like if they're like, what? Miss Bryant, you can't have that due the week before winter break? Okay, well, what do you think is acceptable? What do you think is reasonable then? Because if we change the date to January, do you think you're going to do anything over winter break? And if you do, great, we can change the date. I just want to let you know, then that might be wearing on your mind over the break. But if you all feel comfortable, we can change the date. But just know that you're going to have to still work then over break. So just letting them have that voice and letting them be heard, but also providing them with, hey, have you thought about this as part of the situation? Number 8, assume positive intent. So sometimes I feel like we always think the worst of our teens, especially that middle school age. And I'm not gonna kid you, they're difficult. They're hard. I was with 375 seventh graders last week over 2 days, and getting them concentrated and focused. And they have a whole different level of energy compared to high school students. But sometimes their misbehavior really isn't that, it's curiosity. So trying to figure out, are they just being curious? Maybe I shouldn't accuse them. Maybe I should ask questions to get to the underlying issue of what's going on. So if you think a 10 to 25-year-old is misbehaving, maybe you could say, so, hey, help me understand what was going on in that moment for you to do that. Not saying, you shouldn't do that, cut it out. Hey, help me, because I just don't understand what was going on. Why did you decide to yell at Johnny when he was just sitting there? Did something happen in the cafeteria? Did something happen at an event that you all were at last night, at a sporting event? So try to figure out where this is coming from. It's always not that they're misbehaving. Number 9, teach them with meaning behind the movement, or behind the moment, behind the moment. So help them to reinterpret challenges in a growth-driven way. Help them to understand that there will be setbacks. there's always going to be setbacks. We have them in our daily lives, but help them to make that hurdle. There are hurdles, but we need to help them to understand the end goal and the hurdles that they may need to jump over, that we're there to help them over those hurdles. And then the last one we came up with was treat them like an apprentice, not a problem. Like somebody, that's that whole trainer, that mentor mindset again. Yeager, in his book, he's stressing about treating young people as becoming adults, not as failing adults. So we want to encourage, we want to provide them, but we have to provide that learning opportunity, the curiosity to spark their interest, to spark their growth, and help them with the strategies they need to get to where we hope they will go. Instead of seeing 10 to 25-year-olds as a problem, I think it's important to see that as a window of unique opportunity to help drive the future of our kids, and help drive the future of those people who will be working in the workforce. As a teacher, I love, like, if I look at my bulletin board, I can see my senior pictures that are all hanging up there. I love that they love to provide me updates. Social media can be a big pain in the rear, I understand, but it also can be so amazing to see where your students are and what they're doing, and knowing that if you provide that mentor relationship, then they will come back to you because they feel like they can trust you, that you'll provide guidance, and you'll just be a listening ear for them when they need it. So that's all I have. But if anybody has any questions about how I'm putting this more into practice or what other strategies based on what you are seeing, I'm more than happy to help you.
Thanks so much, Kelly. We'll transition to Mitch and then have an opportunity at the end for a little further discussion. But I loved your transition, and Mitch, I'd love to hear how you, as you're thinking about these concepts, are deploying them in your work and your coaching.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle, and thank you, Kelly, for your insights. Much appreciated. The content of Yeager's research, I think, is just like has such a broad reach into so many aspects of our lives, and I'm excited to just share a couple of ways in which I've been able to kind of like dovetail this into work that I'm already doing. So I think Michelle shared in the beginning, my job as an education consultant is primarily focused on working with leaders. And and so I spend a lot of time one-on-one with education leaders, whether they be superintendents, principals, or instructional coaches. And then I do some group work with them as well. And I'm going to dig into one of those groups here in a moment. I also am a father of 4 kids, 25 and under. So we've had some lovely opportunities to incorporate this thinking at home as well. I first read this book under duress. Michelle basically made me read it, and I've learned over time that when she says that I need to read a book, that I just should do it. A couple very impactful books have hit my life, this being one of them for sure. So the first story I want to tell you is about some work with instructional coaches. These are individuals who are teachers, and part or all of their day is dedicated to supporting and coaching in a non-evaluative role their peers. They're helping to grow purposeful instruction in the classrooms in their schools. And 4 of the individuals in this particular group actually work in Tim Cooper's school. He's on this call, and I know we'll get to hear from him later. But it's a real privilege to get to work with these people. So back in August, we did some setup, and during this first workshop with these instructional coaches, there are 8 people in this group. We dug into the mentor mindset, kind of established the differences between the protector, the enforcer, and the mentor mindset. And then we got to thinking as a group. Everybody got to reflect and think, what's my natural tendency? Where do I lean? Am I more of an enforcer? Am I more of a natural protector? We all have a tendency. And that was a really interesting conversation. And then we built a bridge between that and the role of the instructional coach, which is kind of like mentorship, but also really specific coaching as well. and we unpack the nuances of that. Instructional coaching is a really complicated job, and leading an education is really complicated in general. So it's been really nice to think about these concepts with people who are actively digging in with both kids, but then also with adults. Many of the adults working in schools these days are under 25. And we've got to focus on that quite a bit. That's going to be the audience that I talk about first. Um, but also during that first session, we thought a lot about the balance between high expectations and high supports. Like we really expect a lot of teachers in the community where I live. And we have a lot of really, really high functioning educators. But they need high support in order to be able to do great work. So we thought about that. The next kind of bucket that we dug into was wise feedback, and thinking about the key element there of the transparency statement. Before we give feedback to someone between the ages of 10 to 25, or I would argue anyone for that matter, letting them know that we have benevolent intent. Hey, I'm going to give you some feedback, and I'm only doing it because I know that you have amazing capacity for growth. So we dug into that, and we even practiced doing these as a group, and it was pretty hilarious, very awkward to have people practicing transparency statements. Almost everybody in the room felt uncomfortable with it at first, and then we've been kind of working on more nuanced ways to deliver that transparency statement through wise feedback. So then we brought it all together with some other components as well. We're borrowing from other coaching models, and developed a custom model that we're piloting. We're calling it the quality coaching framework because we weren't feeling very creative that day. But it brings together the mentor mindset, wise feedback, transparency statements, and some other really important elements of coaching. So since then, we've had coaches taking video of their coaching conversations with teachers, and all the teachers that have been part of these videos they've known what they're getting into. They know it's being videoed. They're not usually part of the video. The camera's focused on the coach because that's really what we're breaking down. And we're looking for a few key things and really trying to hone our craft in providing feedback and getting people to take action toward really focused goals that they've set with their coaches. So just at the last session that we had a couple of weeks ago, we watched some videos, both of which included wise feedback delivered in very different ways. One of the coaches did an amazing job of question-based coaching. And Kelly, you mentioned this earlier, just asking a lot of questions to get this teacher to come to the conclusion themselves. And we know that with adult learners, they respond, and I would argue adolescents as well, they respond a lot better to making shifts when they can get there on their own versus somebody telling them things. In one of the other videos, however, there was kind of midstream through this video, the coach did this absolutely beautiful textbook transparency statement. They were talking about the instructional practice that happened to be the focus at that time. And the teacher had done a good job of working to implement that in the classroom. The coach had observed it. The teacher had taken a video of herself and broken it down. And this coach just kind of stopped and said, okay, I'm about to give you some feedback. But I want you to know that the reason I'm doing this is because you have so much going for you. And then she listed 3 or 4 really specific strengths that this young teacher, a first-year teacher, actually has in her back pocket. And then went into like just really direct feedback, like it based on the video that we watched. Here's something that you could work on. And this teacher just ate it up. Immediately started spitballing ideas for how she could implement. And I feel like the stage was set through the transparency statement. And because we're thinking about that mentor mindset and wise feedback. So that was just really fun to see. And it was just such a so blatant. I'm going to give you some feedback because I believe that you have so much going for you, that we all kind of laughed at first. But then realized like, whoa, that totally worked. And it changed the conversation. I think it made everyone else in the room feel more comfortable with the idea of doing this. So yeah, that's been a good experience. It's going to keep going through the end of the year, and I hope to learn more from them as we proceed. I'm going to shift gears and tell you a completely different story from a different place. And this one relates to students. So, a principal that I work with, she oversees several schools, one of which is an alternative high school. And she read this book and a lot of other books, and she brought together the concepts from 10 to 25 with some of the key elements from a book called Thrivers. And in Thrivers, they lay out these kind of attributes that we want to build in young people. They are confidence, empathy, self-control, integrity, curiosity, perseverance, and optimism. And their school decided to adopt those as their core values. And so each month they're kind of digging into one of these attributes that they're working to build within their kids quite purposefully. And the principal came up with this the most interesting way of celebrating these things. So each month they get the whole student body together and they celebrate kids for doing good things. So they've decided to anchor the celebrations all around these attributes from Thrivers, their core values. But then, so here's what they did that I think is fascinating. They have basically they have a 3D printer or some fancy gear in the school, and they've created these dog tags. Each one of the attributes, confidence, empathy, etc., has a little dog tag. They're all different colors, and so you could earn. There's one, two, three, seven of these. You could earn seven of these little dog tags to hang on a chain around your neck or off your backpack. And so they start giving out. They give each kid a little lanyard or a chain, and they start giving these things out. In September at the end of the month, and so each staff member celebrates a couple of kids. Everybody walks away with something. And the kids, I asked, like, so what are they doing with them? Are they, because high school kids, in my mind, I'm like, they're not going to wear these dog tags. And she said they are wearing them. And they're either wearing them around their neck when they come to school, or they have them dangling from their backpack or something along that line. They have them on their keychains. And it just kind of hit me. I'm like, holy cow, you've created like this visual status and respect symbol anchored to your school's core values, and somehow built this bridge between the idea, like, so what motivates kids? Well, according to David Yeager's research, their desire for status and respect. And she created status symbols. Like, and it works so beautifully that I guess I was just really surprised by it. And I still smile when I think about that implementation of these ideas. Like, we're going to work together to define what we want our core values to be, what the kind of attributes we want people to emulate. We're going to celebrate it. And now kids are walking around that school with these symbols, like visual reminders of their core values. And they respect one another and offer each other status because of it. So, a couple things one thing I'm really wondering about, and I've talked with several leaders that I work with about, is how we can leverage this research to foster cultures of effort in schools. A lot of kids just don't necessarily try unless they see a really good reason to try. Some teachers just have a magic touch with students and they'll try for those individuals. And I believe it's probably because they have a mentor mindset and are maybe intuitively implementing some of the moves that David Yeager encouraged us to implement. But we're thinking about that. But some good news, in many schools that I work with, there are dozens of educators actively reading this book, and many educators that make these moves without being super conscious of them. I think the best teachers do this stuff anyway. My wife and I were having a conversation. We have one kid still at home. He's an eighth grader. We were having a conversation with one of his teachers this fall, and she actually, during that conversation, said, well, I'm reading this book called 10 to 25, and here's what I'm trying based on that in my classroom. And we have both read it, and we just, kind of smiled, and we're like, awesome. This is really good. I also know lots of teachers and leaders who are really thinking hard about how to implement voice and choice in school. So school feels less like something's happening to me and more like something where I get to a degree, choose my own adventure, and show what I've learned in ways where, I have some autonomy in the situation. And then I'll finish with a couple of parenting thoughts. Again, I have four kids that fall into the 10 to 25 range. And I think some big shifts there. One is just understanding motivation based on status and respect has been huge. And therefore, rejecting the neurobiological incompetence model. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think most educators and maybe most parents embrace the idea that, or have embraced the idea that adolescents have undeveloped frontal lobes and therefore they screw things up. They do dumb stuff because they don't see cause and effect relationships. And kind of leaving that behind and thinking, no, that what that kid did wasn't dumb. It was just based on a different set of values than I might have. They're focused on status and respect. And if you think about that as their motivator, this thing that they did totally makes sense. Now, if I think about it in terms of adult cause and effect thinking, no, it doesn't make sense. But that has really helped. And my wife, she's a science teacher, a high school science teacher as well. So she uses this stuff in her classroom all the time. But we've overheard one another using wise feedback with our youngest kid here at home, and actually the older ones as well. They're off living their lives, but kind of conversations we're having with the kids have changed, and I think it's making an impact. So I'll hang it up there and turn it over to Michelle. Thank you.
Mitch, thank you. And I loved kind of the synergy between Kelly talking about, those things that she kind of discovered doing kind of naturally as she started to read the research. And I think that's we are all doing these things as youth professionals in ways that we might not know, but can always improve on them. We have with us Tim Cooper, Julie Greer, and Joanne Pruitt, just to kind of just make love a couple of comments about things that resonated, things that you see in your work that insights as you were hearing both Kelly and Mitch. I might invite Tim to start first since uh, he's working with middle school students, and you both mentioned them in particular. Tim, are there things based on some of this research that have shifted for you as you've been thinking about the work? And thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had some technical difficulties. Can you hear me? Good. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know that I'll add anything that hasn't been said. Kelly and Mitch did a great job there. But I think as an organization, it's really important. Just what are your mental models, right? And what is your organizational mindset? Mitch talked about just overcoming the neurobiological incompetence model, and just knowing we have a good majority of our staff doing this book study and thinking about things in this way. It's nice to know that our organization doesn't have kind of a learning disability. They're not thinking about things in the wrong way to start with. I think the biggest change that we've seen is, like everyone has said, just a shift in being conscious about your language and how important your language is. The language that we choose has a tremendous impact on what students, it definitely, I mean, no matter what, it seems like your language always betrays or reinforces what it is that you're truly believing about students. And middle school students, I would say particularly, have like this, it's like a sixth or a seventh sense about how exactly, what exactly you do feel about them and what beliefs you have about them and how much you are believing in what they can accomplish. And so for our teachers, some of them do it really well. Mitch talked about our coaches talking to one another, using transparency statements, all those kinds of things have been huge. But for our younger teachers to step back and see our older teachers talk about the language that they're choosing to use, and how careful they are with the language that they use has been really powerful for us. I think we're always kind of straddling a line between being a performance culture and being a learning culture. And that's a tough line for us. We don't want to get overconfident and think too much about what we've done in the past that's worked. And so being mindful of our language of, we know that growth is at the core of everything that we do, keeping that as a mindset. I guess doubting that what we've done in the past is going to work in the future just because we did it once doesn't mean it's going to work again. Just doubting those things and calling into question what it is that we think we know all the time keeps us in that growth mindset. And that's been something that we've seen quite a bit of this fall.
Tim, thank you so much. I'm curious, Joanne, both as a youth professional, like as a teacher, but also in your role at the state library, were there things that resonated for you and in what you heard?
Sure. Here at the Wyoming State Library, I'm the youth services consultant. And like the majority of you, I used to be an educator. I was a high school English teacher at an alternative high school. And one thing that was amazing at that high school was we looked at, it was called the Discovery Institute. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's very much let's view these kids as human beings and let's treat them as such, but also more on the growth mindset. And so I have that background and that training. And then when I had kids, I have 3 kids that are still fairly young, but a junior higher. So I feel you, Kelly, on that. But then I started realizing I was using this with my own children and just that growth mindset of trying to figure out, okay, what is the motivation behind this? Why are you trying to do this? And working with that. Just the other day, actually, it was just yesterday, my daughter, who's in 4th grade, she had some hurtful things said to her in passing. And she was crying in the car while I was driving home. And I'm like, well, Viola, I understand and I hear you, and so we had to discuss it. And I'm like, oh, I'm still using this stuff. But it's just a wonderful, tangible way that we can speak respectful language that spurs kids on instead of dampening their curiosity. So I love that, the 10 to 25 model really gives us tangible things to use in our everyday lives with our families, but also with kids and with the youth that we are in touch with.
Thanks, Joanne. And Julie, I'm really interested you've had a wide range of work in the in the partnerships space in collaborating with young people and listening to them. I'm just curious, recognizing I know you're new to the 10 to 25 kind of book. You haven't read it necessarily, but I'd love to hear from you in terms of your own experience and what really resonated or thoughts that you had based on what you've heard from our presenters.
Sure, thank you. So looking at everybody's names, probably half of you know who I am and what I do, and half of you have no idea. So just briefly, I am the project coordinator at the Center for a Vital Community here in Sheridan, and we're a nonprofit that works on leadership development, nonprofit support, and community dialogue and initiative work here in Sheridan. We've been around 25 years. We have a lot of opportunity, especially over the past 15, to do work with youth, like Michelle said, in various capacities in the community. One thing we do is 8th grade leadership camp for around 30 to 35 students every summer. So it's 8th graders from Sheridan and Johnson County who are going into high school. We spend a week with them at the summer camp up in the Bighorns, so away from technology, hopefully. And then we also do a lot of collaboration with the John C. Schiffer Collaborative High School here in Sheridan. And so it was probably through those lenses that I was thinking the most about in listening to Mitch and Kelly. I haven't read the book. Michelle told me to read it like 5 years ago and then 2 years ago and again this year, and I still haven't done it. I will, but I will say, in listening to what Mitch and Kelly were both saying, I think what my boss, there's only two of us at the Center for a Vital Community, what my boss and I and all of the women who have come before us in this organization inherently do is treat all of the students that we work with the same way that we treat the adults that we work with. I think we're just lucky that that's kind of how we naturally behave. And all of these tenets are things that we use all of the time in our work across the board. And so we're lucky that we're already doing this, I guess, without thinking too much about it. And so everything that both of you said really connected, because I'm like, oh yeah, we do that, we do that, we do that. We don't think about it, but it's what makes our work with our students effective. Like with our 8th grade leadership camp, definitely what makes that effective, and what makes those students want to continue to connect with us as they move through high school, a lot of them. But specific to the Schiffer Collaborative School, I think one thing that I would like to share with the group, we started a project 3 years ago. It's a photo dialogue project, and I don't need to get into the weeds about it, but Schiffer is great because anytime we have a new idea, we go to the principal and we say, hey, we're starting this thing, we'd like to try it with youth, and the principal and the teachers all say, yes, can you start next week? They're so supportive. And so they were the first place that we tried this photo dialogue project with students. We had done it with adults, but we wanted to try it with students, and it worked really well. So then we took it to another local high school, and I'm not going to say it didn't work well. It didn't work as well. And then we took it to a third high school, and it was incredible. And so what were the differences? The second high school, we were in a classroom. I think the students felt like it was homework. And so they weren't bought into it. They don't care who the CVC is or that this is a really fun project, and it gives them a ton of agency and autonomy. It's still part of class, and so it's something that they're not really interested in. The third high school, it was a lunchtime, you sign yourself up activity. And I think that's why it was outstanding, because they signed up on their own accord. In Schiffer, we were in a classroom. So why did that work, whereas it didn't work in the second school? And I think it has to do with the culture of this collaborative high school. The students choose to be there, and that is built into I wish the principal for that high school were here. I feel like I'm speaking on his behalf, but that's built into the culture of that school. And so because they're choosing to be at school every day, they didn't look at this project that this outside entity came in with as something they're being forced to do. It's just like the rest of their schoolwork. It's an opportunity. And some days they have good days and some days they have bad days, and some days they take the pictures and some days they don't. But they always want to participate in the conversation, and they know that they're going to be treated with respect from us. And so we've continued to do the project with them. We're on our 4th iteration of it right now, whereas we're still trying to work out the kinks with the other schools. So I could speak on and on and on about this, but those were kind of...
That's great, Julie. And by the way, that you have created a great opening for me to let everybody know that starting in January, we are going to do a statewide book study where we take advantage of everyone's experience, but also give an opportunity for us to broaden the conversation. And we'll be sending information out about that in the next, actually right after this call, with a summary of the call. But I want to just invite, if there are others, does anyone else have any comments or thoughts or questions for our presenters? Kelly or Mitch, any thoughts or sort of resonances as you're listening to others that you want to add as you've been thinking about it? Kelly, you had the beginning, and I want to make sure you've had lots of time to. I've seen lots of nodding there. So
One thing I think is important that I don't know if I really got across is that student voice is just so important in everything we do. So anytime that if you have like advisory groups, consider putting some of our 10 to 25-year-olds on your advisory group so that they feel like they have a voice, that the greater group is listening to what they think, how they feel, and maybe how they can volunteer, because that's one of the things we've seen post-COVID is that our youth, our young people volunteering, it's really dropped off quite a bit. So that might be one of the reasons we need to really listen to them and let them have that voice.
Mitch, any thoughts or
Sure.
additions?
Yeah, I think I'll just highlight the concept of intentionality, and I think this resonated through several of the comments made here. It's pretty easy to celebrate in a lot of the schools I work with, and Tim's being a notable example of how intentional the educators are with every move that they make and every word that they say. And the way that they design instruction to engage students. I mean, there's so much intentionality with our best educators these days, and I feel like um, that we can add a layer of intentionality through, Tim's reference to language, just how we talk to kids, not only how we design and learning experience, but also how we talk to them and being really intentional. There's just a lot of different recipes that come to us through Yeager's work of that help us be intentional in fostering motivation and voice and choice, and I mean any number of things, just the right kind of mindset in our kids. And I think that's what I'm excited about, knowing that there are so many educators and parents out there reading this book, and the fact that we're even having this conversation today, that it will lead to really intentional implementation and just better outcomes for everybody.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to everyone, and really appreciate this. We're following this conversation next week with a conversation about career connected learning, and we'll have a wonderful representative from the STEM Next Foundation who has provided a really interesting framework around career connected learning. So I hope folks who have an interest in that will join us. We will also send out a summary of this and with some additional resources and activities that are coming up if you're interested in this. So really delighted to have you here and appreciate everybody's time. Anyone have any final remarks or comments? All right. Well, thanks everybody. And just as a note, we will you'll in the summary you'll have a link and a little bit more of an announcement about the book study that will be starting in January. This is in partnership with the State Library, and thanks to Joanne and her colleague Paige, we've got a few more 10 to 25 library versions on the Libby app. So if you have any interest in jumping on right now, I noticed this morning that there are 4 books available right now, so you can you can get them for free either to listen or to borrow. So very happy to have everybody here, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing some of you next time as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle.